Hey guys, Mike at Craft Beer Storm. For you, we have another awesome guest today. We have Jason Perkins, who's the Allagash BrewMaster, right? Allagash in Portland, Maine, making awesome beer. We use their barrels. They make the Curio. They get barrels from Jim Beam, and then they sell them. We take them, and we condition our beer in them. They're awesome because they had the bourbon in there for 4 years, so why not? And people love the beer. So just 1 minute, if you can go on to iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review, subscribe, tell a friend, tell 10 friends. That's the only way we can, get up in the rankings. I like to bring you excellent guests. We had Fergal Murray last week, and now we have Jason Perkins of Allagash. Everybody loves Allagash here up in the Northeast, and they're out in California too. And I talked to a couple California people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Allagash is awesome." So please do that for me. Go on to iTunes. But for now, we have Jason. Here we go. Hey, we have Jason Perkins on the line. How you doing, Jason?
I'm doing very well. Thanks.
I'm glad you carved some time out to give me today. I appreciate your time. I told you we just had Fergal Murray, who's the brewmaster for Guinness. I just got off the phone with him to talk to him about his journey, and then I have Mitch Steele after you. It's like unbelievable. Like it's a Thursday. It's like a dream, right?
That's I don't know about myself, but the other two are pretty impressive characters.
Believe me, everybody talks about Allagash who comes in here. Well, we're a brewery in Portsmouth, but also across the country. I think you guys are distributing, around the country as well. People talk about Allagash. Yeah, I think I don't know how far out do you guys go? Like when you distribute.
We go as far as California.
Yeah,
but
so
we're not in every state. We're in 17 states, so it's more or less the eastern seaboard. All the Atlantic touching states except for Florida, and then we kind of hopscotch over to Chicago, but really just greater Chicago, and then the whole state of California.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's really excellent beer, I have to say. And I'm glad I got you on.
Thank
you. My favorite, the Avancé. Am I saying it correctly?
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Oh man, that stuff is wow. That stuff is amazing. And then I was looking on your website and how you make it. And
it's not simple.
No, it's not because you have to use you introduce it. And I tell people like sour beer because you do the Belgian styles, but you guys have it down. Whatever you make is really good. I mean, a lot of brewers attempt the Brett and they try to use that yeast and it comes out sour. It's just like it's better for a salad rather than to drink. It's too vinegary, but yours is really good. I mean, you know what you're doing, so
thank you.
That's awesome. No, but so maybe we start with you. Maybe how'd you get into brewing? How'd you get to Allagash? Maybe your journey. Maybe you can go over that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess if I go back a little further, I grew up in a real small town in Vermont. Our family had a small, gentleman's farm, I guess you could call it. And I only bring that up because I feel like sometimes that connection to, growing a lot of our own food and raising some of our own animals and our own meat kind of, I think, set me into, down a path of really enjoying creating things and having a hands-on, approach to creating things and cooking, etc. But jump forward from there. I went to college in Maine and started to get into homebrewing. Actually, my brother, who's about a year and a half older than me, was a homebrewer before me, and he loves to, he still does a little bit of homebrewing on the side, but he loves to tell people he taught me everything about making beer, which is not necessarily true at all, but it's a funny little joke he loves to tell all the time. So homebrewing really is what got me into it initially, like so many other kind of people of the craft brew generation that I am. And I just kind of fell in love with making beer. And after college, I moved to Missoula, Montana, with my girlfriend, my wife now. We moved out there together, and just we're moving out to the Rocky Mountains to get some skiing and wilderness living in.
Wow.
And so I was homebrewing, and honestly, kind of fortuitously, there was this little breweries that also sold homebrew ingredients in the town of Missoula, and they were hiring. And, I was waiting tables at the time and homebrewing. And I said, I hate waiting tables, and I love making beer. This seems like a no-brainer. So I applied for the job. They hired me. And I think within a week, I wouldn't say that I knew I would do it for the rest of my life, but I just fell in love with the concept of being able to do something that I love, and making beer and getting paid for it. Granted, not getting paid a lot, but so I worked there. That brewery is still around, doing some great stuff. It's called the Kettle House. They were much smaller back when I was there, which is in 1997, 98. But now they're still doing some great stuff out there. We moved back. We moved back to Maine after living in Missoula for about a year. Really, I'm from Vermont. My wife's from Western New York. We had a lot of family in the East, and so we just really wanted to get back to the East Coast. And I started working, and I knew I wanted to stay making beer. So initially, I started working for a brew pub called Gritty McDuff's, which has been around for a long time. One of Maine's original breweries. Mm-hmm. I worked for them at their Freeport and Portland brew pubs for a little while. And, from the get-go, that job was more of a temporary part-time job anyway. So I was still kind of casually looking. And that's when I met Rob Todd, the owner of Allagash. Allagash was a lot smaller back then. This was late 1998. And they were looking for some help, and we just kind of hit it off. At that point, it was, Rob, one other full-time employee, and then another part-time guy. And I just kind of, I guess, luckily hit it off with those guys. They liked me, I liked them. And so I started working for Rob in the very early, like one of the first few days in 1999. And I've been there since. So that's, I just hit my 20-year mark last month or 2 months ago now. And it's been a really incredible ride. And really a complete honor and joy to be part of a company that has grown the way we have, and making beer at a time that, I think I've said before that the last 20 years and kind of the history of making probably any alcoholic beverage at all in any place in the world, I don't know if there could be a better time and place. I just feel kind of fortunate to have found Allagash, but also just to be honestly alive in this time frame, to be able to live through this incredible experience that's been craft beer growth in the U.S. in the last 20 years. It's been amazing. It
is incredible, yeah. And you mentioned Missoula, Montana. I'm looking at I did a podcast with Ryan Newhouse. He's out there. He does Beer Now. He does, I don't know if you heard of him, but he does Beer Now conferences. So he does conferences for the beer industry. And it was interesting you said Missoula, because I did some work. Where was I? Williston. I was in North Dakota. Doing some work, but and it's close to Montana. I think it's a different time zone too. Like if you cross the border, it's like a half hour.
Missoula is just an incredible town. Great town. They had a good beer scene back then, and that was early on in this. They had Kettle House was there, Big Sky, which is still there, Bayern Brewing were all three there at the time, and all making some great beer. And now, of course, they've blown up like every other state in the country, and they've got a whole bunch more. But they've had kind of a cool craft beer scene in Missoula for quite a while.
And that's Big Sky. Is that the ski resort there?
Yeah, there's a ski resort closer to Bozeman, but the Big Sky Brewery is in Missoula.
Okay, cool. Wow. Yeah, I got to go out. I got to get out there. There's a lot of places I need to go to. I keep talking to everybody, and it just seems very interesting. But we do use your barrels, actually. I use your Curio. You make the Curio and the Jimmy barrels?
Yep.
And then what I do is I go up and I buy them from you guys, and we just, we throw like 200-degree water in it, and it's ready. It's ready for our beer. So we just age. I've done the stout in them. I've done strong ale. I just did a Weizenbock, actually. We just aged it. I had some extra Weizenbock, so we aged it, and it was our 4th anniversary ale, actually. And people love it. They love the bourbon and the oak that comes out of those barrels. But your Curio is fantastic. And if you have any barrels you don't need, I can help you out. Take them from you if you want. Any other esoteric barrels, I'd love to take them, man. Wow. But anyway, how did you get into? Because that room that you have is huge. Like you have barrels, like I don't know how many deep and high. Like how'd the aging come about in the barrels?
Yeah, we kind of so we actually have two barrel rooms, 2 barrel cellars at the brewery. One is really kind of referred to around the brewery as the curio room, because the vast majority of the barrels in that room are for curio, freshly emptied fresh bourbon barrels. We age our triple in to create curio, but it's really more accurately a kind of non-wild, non-sour, a clean barrel room, if you will. And that, so, it's mostly curio, but we have some other beers that we do from time to time that utilize that room. And then we also, the next building over, which is actually the building we started in originally, is now become kind of our wild barrel room. And in that space, we have, all sorts of different barrel types, and aging, everything in that space. We've got some fooders, some large oak tanks over there as well. Everything over there is, what we call wild. So in some way, has something in addition to or instead of traditional brewer's yeast. So, whether that's Brettanomyces or lactic acid bacteria, spontaneous fermentation, et cetera. But how we got into it really kind of, like a lot of things with, the slower growth that was craft beer, 10, 15 years ago. It was just something we kind of slowly worked our way into. I mean, we didn't put in those 2 barrel rooms of that size overnight. We went, we first started aging beer in oak barrels sometime around 2003, 2004. And, at that point it was 2 barrels on one rack. And then it became 4, and then so on and so forth. And, over time, our barrel rooms have had many different forms and sizes. And we've settled into a good spot now where we can keep the wild and sour barrels in a completely different facility, but still like literally next door, about a minute walk from one building to the other.
Right.
So we kind of grew in slowly into the place where we are today to have that many barrels.
Yeah, but the curio's delicious too. Wow, that's a really great beer.
Thank you.
And you have, and I'm not just saying this because you're on. I really do think that it's excellent beer. Sometimes people say things, but I really think it's excellent, really. And a lot of people that I talk to about Allagash they're just like, wow. And it shows. It's very good beer. And the Belgian styles that you do. You also do the cool ship, right? It's kind of like you have, it's just kind of you expose, maybe you can go over, because this podcast is kind of geared towards maybe the average beer drinker, that we're trying to educate them on in terms of a cool ship and what it is, and, the particulars in the air that get in. And can you explain it to us?
Yeah. Try to be as concise as I can, because there's a lot I can say about it. But just first, I'll say that cool ships, the vessel themselves, have really been around for, no one really knows how long, but probably realistically a couple hundred years. And, really they were created, like a lot of historical processes of making beer, wine, food, et cetera. It's not like, people moved from not doing it to doing it the way we do it today. It's a slow evolution of figuring out how it was done. And, depending on what history book you read about beer, but most agree that beer was probably accidentally discovered, whether somebody left grain out that got wet and like wild, and then liquid came off it and microbes fermented it and somebody drank it, et cetera. And, some form of that is probably the case. And, we don't know exactly how it evolved, but over time, brewers, really, people who were making beer or making some type of beer-like beverage, kind of figured out stuff that made the process better. So maybe they early on at some point they figured out, if I take the leftover kind of bottom of this batch and add it to my new batch, that's going to ferment faster and make a better beer or a better beverage. They don't necessarily understand yeast per se, but they understand that process. And cool ships, I believe were kind of invented in a similar way, where at some point the idea of heating your liquid and then, I need to cool said liquid down in order to get it to ferment. Because obviously whatever this magical substance is that ferments it, isn't going to ferment something that's hot.
Mm-hmm.
So they, a bunch of different vessels were invented to do that, and a cool ship is one of them. So for a long time, many breweries, if not maybe even all, had some form of a cool ship, whether or not they were making funky lambic style wild beer or not. They were just, that's what they did. That's what they used.
Right.
And as scientific discoveries around making beer came along, and they started to understand what yeast was and how yeast worked, and some very important scientific discoveries over the years between Hansen and Carlsberg and Pasteur, of course, got to a point where single cell single strain fermentation became the norm, I think, relatively quickly. At that point in time, most of these cool ship vessels designed to cool the wort down kind of went away, and went to a closed cooling system to keep the wort from the brew house as pure as possible. And I only want to ferment my beer with a single strain of yeast or whatever. The majority of cool ships that stayed around, or the ones that like most famously stayed around, were the ones that were making spontaneous fermentation or lambic beer. And a lot of those are, and still are, based in Belgium and in kind of greater Brussels area. And we at Allagash, from the very beginning, when Rob opened the brewery in 1995, we were, brewed beers influenced by Belgian brewing tradition. So,
just to interrupt you for a second, the wort,
sure.
Like you said, you mentioned wort, and I just want to make sure people understand what wort is. It's like what we do is you introduce hot water into a vessel. Usually it's insulated, and then you have grain that's introduced into it as well, and the starch converts to sugar in the grain. It creates wort, and that's what wort is. And then the bacteria and also the yeast attacks that sugar, and then produces alcohol and all kinds of goods flavors. So sorry, I just wanted to clarify.
That's good to
because we know what wort is, but everybody else is like, oh, what's this wort stuff? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So it's beer before it ferments. It's another way to think about it.
Beer before it ferments.
It's the liquid that's created by grain, mixing grain, filtering off this liquid and adding hops and so on.
Right.
But for fermentation, you need yeast to ferment, and after you're boiling the liquid at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, there's no yeast in the world that can survive there. So you need to figure out a way to get it from boiling temperature down to a temperature that the yeast is happy in. And almost all breweries in the world, including us on our normal brew house, we're using what's called a heat exchanger, which simply just takes this boiling liquid down, and using either cold water or some kind of coolant, kind of like your radiator in your car, will take that hot wort and turn it into cold wort, which then can ferment with yeast. Right. So with a cool ship, we're doing the same thing in a slower and honestly not very efficient way, where we're cooling it in this cool ship overnight. So the natural air going over the liquid, this hot liquid, will cool it. And cool ships are, like we often talk about it looks like a big brownie pan. So it's just this big pan, very shallow. Ours is about 20 inches deep for 20 barrels of liquid. So 600 gallons or so of liquid. So that the idea being, with a shallow vessel, you have lots of surface area for the heat to dissipate and for the liquid to cool. Right. But what also happens in that process is you get natural inoculation of resident wild yeasts and wild bacteria that are in your area. And that's what we call spontaneous fermentation. So as opposed to taking your hot wort from the brew house, cooling it down, and adding a pure culture or a strain of yeast to your beer, in this case, we're not adding any yeast. We are relying solely on, during that cooling process, this natural inoculation of wild yeast and microbes. And that's why we call it, that's why it's kind of referred to as spontaneous fermentation.
So I see on your website, I see like there's a shed or something. I mean, is there like a roof that opens up, or how does that work? I mean, you just take it from the air, right? Or how does that?
Yeah, you're right. It looks very much like a shed. A couple stained glass windows on it to make it look a little more church-like, but it is effectively a shed. And what we do is we have louvered windows. The stained glass windows actually are louvered, so they open, and it allows us to draw natural air across it. It takes depends a little bit on the overnight temperature, but it takes roughly 16 to 18 hours to get that hot wort from the 210 or so Fahrenheit by the time that vessel is full. Wow. To 65 Fahrenheit is usually around where we're targeting to bring it in. So and then from there, it ferments in oak barrels naturally, some complete natural fermentation for 2 to 3 years. So that's another really unique part about this process is to get this beer to ferment and develop some natural sourness and really kind of roundness of flavor is a long process.
Man, that's why you've been there for 20 years, right? I guess.
Yeah, right. So we started that project in 2007. Wow. We're 12 years in now. But it took us, it wasn't until 2011 before we sold our first bottle of anything. It took that long to do the process, build up some stock. So we had some beer to blend and so on. Wow.
That's amazing. But I guess you have your Maine, so you have some nice good air there and a lot of good stuff up there. So, and you made a couple of them. There's a couple cool. Well, you made I see like about 10 of them so far that you're out there, like the
Maroons, so the way that process works is it's the same base beer for all the beers we've sold that have that coolship label to them. So from the brew house side, the process of mixing grains and hops and so on, it's all the same there. We use a bunch of wheat, local wheat and local malted barley, aged hops, etc. And then it all gets aged in these used wine barrels, fermented and aged for 2 to 3 years. And then we take that base beer at that point and through blending and the addition of fruits, we'll create various beers. So we have Coolship Red, for example, which is aged on local raspberries. We have Coolship Cerise, which is aged on local cherries. Coolship Resurgam is an unfruited version where we blend together various ages of. So we have some actually 1, 2, and 3-year-old spontaneous beer together, and we blend those together to create Coolship Resurgam. So same base beer creates a number of different beers.
Wow. Yeah, it seems very interesting. And you could do a lot with beer. It's just so interesting. You can add local, and you use a lot of local products too, right? Or
we sure do. Absolutely.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you use local cherries, you say, or
yeah, we've been using using local fruits for years. Cherries, strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, peaches, all from the state of Maine. And we've been big advocates for local ingredients for a while, and for quite some time, fruit was actually kind of the only one or the easiest one that we could source local ingredients. Uh-huh. Luckily, over the last 5, 6, 7 years, the availability of for one, malted barley, which is the base of all beer, at least in some percent, was not available from Maine because yes, barley was grown in Maine, but no one was malting it, which is this whole other process separate from brewing. To prepare a barley kernel to be used for brewing, it must be malted, which is, that could be a whole podcast in and of itself for you.
Actually, it's funny you say that. I have I'm talking to Amber, the Maine Grains.
Oh, she's great.
Yeah. And I got to get her on. She was on Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart had her on.
She sure was.
That's unbelievable. Yeah. I'm like, and then she's like, I'm busy. I'm with Martha Stewart. So we've been bouncing back and forth for a couple of months. But now I think we have a date in the calendar, and I'm going to talk to her. And I've used I think it was flaked wheat. What is it? I forget what it was.
Yeah, they sell flaked wheat and oats, and they don't sell any unmalted grains. But they also have really helped a lot with her business, Maine Grains, coming on and really making available some really wonderful locally grown, and they still have to process it, flake it, clean it, etc. Oats, wheat, spelt. We've used some spelt from them, some rye. But she's great. She's done a tremendous amount of work for just small grain growth in Maine.
Yeah.
She's a huge advocate for really bringing back more and more growth of small grains in the state of Maine, because Maine used to be a huge grower of small grains,
right?
And there's tons of available fields and wonderful farmers. Just need to get that demand up. So she's done a ton of work on making ingredients available for brewing, but also on the baking side as well. She used to be the executive director too of the Maine Grain Alliance, which is a nonprofit. She's moved on from that, but she's still really active in really promoting small grain growth in the state of Maine.
Yeah, it's amazing. I wouldn't think grain would grow in this. Well, like hops too. People are trying to grow hops in the area here, but hops you need a certain climate. Like in the Pacific Northwest, it's perfect because it's the moisture and. But the grains, yeah, they're good. And I mean, Maine is a big state. Probably has a lot of fields available, a lot of acreage, so you can make some good grain.
Barley has been grown in Maine for decades.
Wow.
But for many years it's been grown as a rotational crop for potatoes. Potatoes are,
right.
Maine is known for potatoes. There's a lot of potato farms up north, but potato growth really strips the field of a lot of nutrients. So you can't grow potatoes on the same acreage of land every year, or you'll just deplete the ground. So barley is a great rotational crop, but the vast majority of those barley crops were just used for feed. So just like a cover crop, a rotational crop, not a real moneymaker for the farmers, just something that they did on the side. But with the coming on of a couple malt houses in Maine Malt House and Blue Ox Malt House, it's created an opportunity for these farmers to grow beer or brewing quality barley, which is good for brewers, but it's also good for the farmers because they can command a higher price than they can for feed barley, and they can actually make a living on growing barley as opposed to just being kind of a filler crop. Yeah.
No, it's interesting. I mean, I'm not a farmer, but that makes a lot of sense, and rotational crops. I think, in Ireland too, they used to do hop. Well, it depends on the farmer and what they can make as well, like what the demand is. I think they were growing hops in Ireland, and then I don't know what happened. Well, I just talked to the Guinness brewmaster, so I really shouldn't say anything. But I think Guinness was like kind of putting a stranglehold on the farmers, and they didn't want to sell they didn't want to buy the hops for that much money. So the farmer said, "All right, forget it. We're just going to go to barley." And so it depends on the farmer as well. But that makes a lot of sense. What you're saying, the potatoes take a lot of nutrients from the ground, so barley would be a great.
Hops, I will say, hops are a pretty challenging crop to grow anyway.
Yeah.
Well, somewhat challenging to grow, but equally as challenging to harvest and to process. So, that's one of the reasons why it really, the vast majority of hops in the U.S. are grown in the Pacific Northwest, because there's an infrastructure there for handling, for harvesting, picking, drying, pelletizing, etc., where there really isn't that infrastructure in the East. So it's a much bigger challenge for growing hops in the East versus grain, where grain there is an infrastructure in the East for growing grain, and it has been for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. So it's great to use local product. We try to use local products as well. There's a guy in the Rye here in New Hampshire. He has honeybees. He has like apiaries around the seacoast, so he uses honey. And then there's a guy in Barrington. He has maple syrup, so we use that. But we like, I think I've used Maine fruit in the past. I got to do it again. I think some blueberries, I believe. But it's awesome stuff. Like local stuff is really good. So we're trying to push the local as well as local breweries. And what do you see in terms of the? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just said great. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah. No, I mean, and we're trying to push local. That's the whole podcast is, to try to educate people that there are, breweries in your area, and you should go out and visit them. Go into the tap room, support them. They're like, moms and dads. They have kids, and they have a passion. People don't realize about the, I have the brewery here, but it kicks my ass. It's a hard thing. And we do a lot of stuff manually as well. We don't have a lot of intricate systems where you push a button and things flow from one to the next. It's just,
sure.
Connecting and disconnecting hoses, and then always cleaning, sanitizing. So just to make sure that, there's a lot of effort that goes. So, and it helps. Local helps everybody, as well. Like local maple syrup, local honey helps their businesses. Local food, maybe their chefs, do a food pairing. Do you guys do a lot of food pairing there, or work with some local chefs?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to pat ourselves on the back, but we've been doing food pairings and beer dinners before, for many, many years before a lot of other people did. And really that was just based on, certainly our love of food, but also our connection to Belgian brewing tradition. I mean, that's a cornerstone of, Belgium is this wonderful country for beer. And a big part of that is this connection with food, and beer cuisine has been a thing in Belgium for forever. And so, really for us kind of following and being inspired by that tradition of brewing, it just led us right away into, from the very beginning when we came out with a new beer, we would think about and then talk about what foods this beer would go well with, and then, doing paired dinners, working with local chefs. And then we are just so spoiled in Portland, especially for a food scene. It's always been a good food scene in Portland, but really in the last 5 to 10 years, it's just gotten just crazy. And we are like, the foods and talent that we have in Portland is on par with honestly any major city in the U.S. And we're still just a small city. So we're just, so lucky to be able to, work with these local guys. And, it used to be, a restaurant with great food in Portland and really anywhere was you'd go in and maybe you'd be lucky if they had one beer on draft and, they'd have a small beer list, but it was all about, wine. And of course wine's great with great food, but it's been really nice to see with, as one of the side effects of this great revolution of craft beer is, at least in Portland, if you're a new restaurateur and you're opening up and you're planning on having, being known for great food, you better have a great beer list too, because that's what the consumer wants these days. And, that was not the case 15 years ago at all. The beer was at the casual places, the pub type food. And now there's great beer really at, every great restaurant, which is awesome to see.
Oh, yeah. And it's great to, a lot of people do the food and wine pairing, food and wine. Well, beer can be intricate. And I mean, you demonstrated, I mean, that avancé, what do you do? Like you age it in barrels, then you introduce, and then you introduce strawberries into it. And it's like a really complex beer where it could be in par with a nice wine, right? And you can pair that with food and working with chefs. But Portland, I agree with you. It's really a destination place, and there's a lot of fantastic. I got to spend more time up there. Go up there and just stay overnight, and just hang out. At the breweries and eat the food, which is delicious. I'm trying to hook up with a lot more chefs here, and also in Ireland. There was a chef in Ireland that connected me with the BrewMaster at Guinness. That's how I got connected with him. But he's fantastic, and he knows a lot of people too. So it's a great community. I mean, beer is food, right? You just gotta
absolutely.
And I always remind everybody here. I'm like, dudes, we make food here, right? Everything's got to be clean. Totally. People are going to eat this. They're going to drink it, right? It's like eating something. So you cannot cut corners or anything like that. So. So I think that the local scene, and what do you think about the beer, craft beer in general in terms of the scene? Do you think it's like a bubble, or what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a hard question to answer. I mean, I think there's certainly no doubt in my mind that we're getting into a time where the ability to kind of almost do no wrong or to grow it without much trouble. Those days I think are getting less and less. I think there was a handful of times, in the last 5 years especially, where the kind of the barriers to entry to opening a brewery were a lot smaller, mostly because there was opportunity. There was there was not as many breweries, and now depending on the market, there are a lot. There's a lot of certain markets might have 50 breweries in the same town. I think Chicago has 100 and something. So in those cases, I think it is going to be more challenging. Because there's continues to be growing interest in craft beer. I don't think that's going to change. Mm-hmm. And for a long time, to use simple economic terms, the demand was easily outpacing the supply. I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore. I think the demand has caught up to the supply. So I think people who are doing a good job, creating great beers, creating a good experience for their consumers, and are focused on quality, I think are going to, continue to have opportunities. I think those who, aren't focused on quality and we're really just building their businesses around, the opportunity that was there without focusing on doing things right from both a business and a quality perspective. I think that unfortunately they will probably see some folks who do close.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's still opportunity out there for Allagash, for other breweries, for continued, businesses to even open. I think, the wonderful thing that has changed in a lot of states, and Maine is certainly one of them, where, I forget exactly how many years it's been, but 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, you couldn't sell beer on site at a brewery unless you were a brew pub.
Yeah.
You couldn't sell it to be consumed on site, and that the laws have changed. And now, out of the 130 or whatever breweries we have in Maine now, at least half of those, I'm guessing, are selling the vast majority of their beer over the counter at their tap room. And that creates, a good economic model for breweries,
Mm-hmm.
And allows, small businesses, with a handful of employees to be profitable, where, it's really hard to have a small brewery with a couple employees when you were relying on selling all of that beer elsewhere in a store or in a bar or restaurant. So
yeah, the margins
there's a lot more opportunity.
Yeah.
And consumers are willing to pay more than they used to be. That's an unbelievable change for what a consumer is now willing to pay for craft beer versus 15 years ago. It's pretty astronomically different.
Well, I guess they're getting it because it's more complex now, and it's approaching the the status of wine, right? They want a good beer.
Yeah.
They just don't want water. They want a good beer. But I agree with you about the people just coming into the industry, and you got to have a passion for it. We're trying to sell our location here because I've kind of outgrown it. I've done what I had to do here. I have a brand, and I wanted to move on to the next level. Michael at craftbeerstorm.com in case anybody's interested. But I'm trying to educate people that, look, this is a turnkey brewery. You don't want to go in with like a load of money and buy a 30-barrel system and then make some beer and pray that it sells, right? You want to do it kind of organically. Start small, make your beers, try some things, trial and error, see what sells, but also focus on the tap room, because the margins in the tap room are 80-90%, which is what you build a business on. You don't do it by packaging, which we started to get into cans. I see you guys got into cans too. We'll talk about it in a minute. But there's a lot of, and I see it because we do this craft brew news every Friday. I do 3 podcasts a week to try to release them, and just story after story. Bankruptcy. People just go nuts. They buy all this kinds of equipment. They do a 15-barrel, 30-barrel system, and then the beer sits there, or they have disagreements with their distributors, and then just the whole thing collapses. They can't make the loan payments, and the bank comes in. I think starting small is probably the best thing, which is what Allagash did. I mean, they started small, but they've grown into this Allagash, right? So and now you're distributed, but that's the way to do it, But yeah, like mentioning the cans, I think I was seeing that you started cans last year, right? How's that going? You had the hoppy table beer, and then there were some other beers you have in cans.
Yeah, it's been good so far. I mean, we kind of had stayed kind of away from putting beer in cans for a bunch of years, and not any reason, not because we didn't think that beer was a good package or anything. It was really more focus. We were pretty focused on, we already sell our beer in kegs, of course, but 12-ounce bottles, 750 milliliter bottles, 375 mil bottles. So, and already running a couple different bottling lines and a keg line. So, we just kind of didn't want to go down that road just because we were focused on what we were doing. But we always loved the idea of cans, and we actually brought in a couple of the mobile canning companies, these companies who have small can lines in the back of the truck. And we brought them in a couple times only for employees, just because we kind of like the idea of having cans. So we bring them in once a year and have them do, a handful of cases of white or one of our other beers. And just in, unlabeled silver cans. And then every employee would get some. And, we'd always do it in the summer when it was, people would get a chance to drink, Allagash White in a place they wouldn't normally, because in a canoe or a boat or whatever. So we kind of liked the idea of cans, and finally decided, you know what, the time's right. The consumers are asking for it. They've been asking for it for years. We love the idea of kind of giving somebody the ability to experience our beer in a place they couldn't before. And there's so many venues now, whether it's concert venues or ballparks and so on, which never poured craft beer before. It was all, Bud Light, et cetera. These places now are pouring a lot. So it lets us, once again, give someone who loves our beer an opportunity to drink it somewhere else. So, so we put in a small for us can line, about, I guess, eight months ago or so. And just have decided to kind of start slow. So we did Hoppy Table Beer first. Then we did a couple other small releases of some cans just in our store only. And then as of about a few weeks ago, we started selling white and a new beer called River Trip in a limited footprint. So right now we're in Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, and part of New York. And we'll be opening up a few other states later this year. We won't be able to hit our entire footprint until we figure out a larger can line to put in, because we just can't, capacity wise, keep up in our entire footprint. So 7 of our states, our 17 states, will get cans by around May, June.
Man, I wish I had your beer. I went to a City Field. I'm originally from New York, so I go see the Mets, once in a while, and they have like massive cans of like whatever, I don't know, Budweiser. It's like $14 a can, for a 23-ounce can. It's like ridiculous. But if they had your beer there, I'd definitely take it. I'd definitely drink it. And that's a way. Actually, that's a great way, you just pointed out, to get people introduced to your beer as well, that they wouldn't normally. Maybe they're exposed to Bud Light or whatever, in these cans, but they see Allagash in cans, like, what's that, and then they try it. But your white has been kind of a flagship, I guess, right, of yours? The Allagash White? It's all over the place.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's definitely has been our flagship from day one.
It's a very good beer, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
But, I mean, it's, it's, the craft beer industry is just, it's drama, right? It's like a big opera. It's like a lot of things happen every day, and you hear stories like, what? And there's just packaging. Like, I don't understand. I mean, everybody wants cans, whatever, I hope it's a fad. Because I built this business to, we're small. So I like 22-ounce bottles. That's the reason why I started the business. And then that kind of fell off the map. And people won't take 22. Well, I'm forcing craft beer stores to take it again. Because we have like our Oreo infused Java Porter, which people want. But I'm like, all right, well, this is the only package it's going to be in, and then they buy it. But
sure.
It's the cans. I can't make any money off these cans. It's ridiculous. But maybe we'll do growlers. I don't know if you guys don't do growlers up there. Do you fill growlers at your tap room or anything? Or
we don't. No, we don't. We don't do growlers.
You just do. I don't do growlers either. I have bottles. So if they want something, they take bottles. So hopefully we'll reverse the trend. So see what happens.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, we're certainly not. We're not giving up on bottles. We still. I still think bottles are a great package for beer, and I especially have a soft spot in my heart for the cork finish bottles that we do.
Oh yeah.
In both, and that's also a product that is, 750 ml cork bottles are not selling the way they used to sell. We still have two beers we make year round, Triple and Curio, and that still do pretty well. But that is a package that's kind of fallen off the map as well. But I'm hopeful that there's a resurgence for them, because I think it's a wonderful package for beer, and we're going to keep making them, that's for sure.
Well, that's great, And I think Maine Beer Company, did they get it to cans yet? I don't know. I think I heard something.
Nope.
They're still in bottles, right? Good.
They're not selling anything in cans. I don't know whether there's something they're looking into or not, but they're still selling, and that's that classic kind of Maine Beer Company bottle.
No, I think their bottles are awesome, yeah. And I think the
for
packaging,
sure,
too, like if you want to equate good beer with wine, if you put wine in a can, I mean, I'm not gonna buy that thing, or wine in a box. Like, yeah, okay, whatever. I want a bottle that's corked, right?
Sure.
And that's my perception, but I don't know. We'll work on that. We'll keep working on that. But hey, it was excellent for you to take your time out. I appreciate it. Your beer is excellent, and your barrels are really fantastic. People love the beer that come. Like whenever they taste it, they're like, "Man, this is awesome!" I'm like, well, we got it used to be Curio barrels, and they all know it. They all know about it, and they're like, "Wow, it's great." And they look and they get mad when I run out of it. They get mad. Like
sure.
I ran out of the. We did the Bourbon Oak Mighty, which is a strong ale, and we aged it in your barrels, and then we ran out of it. And they were upset. I'm like, well, what do you want from me? I have one barrel; it's 50 gallons. I have to get more, So I go up and I get them. But hey, if you got some fancy barrels and you want somewhere to go, I gladly take them from you. That'd be awesome. But I appreciate you being taking the time out to talk with us. I think you educated everybody about what you're doing, and I think you guys are doing an awesome job. And I got to come up there again and try some more things. But you're only an hour away, so I got to go up. I got to make more time and go up. It's just I have so much to do. But I appreciate your time, Jason.
Yeah, you bet.
And
happy to do it.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Yeah, we'll talk soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Care.
Okay, bye.
All right.
Bye.
All right, bye.
Yeah, that was Jason Perkins, the brewmaster for Allagash. Really good stuff. They're making excellent beer. He's doing a lot of different things with beer, barrel aging, bacteria, fruit, local fruit. It's really delicious stuff. So if you get a chance to get some Allagash, really give it a try. It's very good. The Allagash White's all over the place, so I'm not sure where you are. But he said he's out in California, so if you're out there too, or if you're in the area, Northeast, and, go to the Allagash Brewery in Maine, Portland, Maine. Well worth a visit. And Portland has a lot of awesome other breweries, so you can take a look at them too. But, Jason, that was really good, really good. Avance, if they have Avance, check it out. It's good stuff. Okay, look, if you like what we are doing, you like our guests, I bring this to you free of charge. All I ask is that you go on iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review, share this with a friend. Share it with 10 friends. Why not? Or 20. It's okay. Post it on Facebook. That's the only way we're going to get up in the rankings. iTunes looks at this stuff, algorithms, and then they rank us further up the ladder. And then, we get better guests. Like we got these 3 guests today. It was fantastic. Help me out here, trying to go up in the rankings. There's stuff out there on iTunes. It's like they haven't been recorded since 2015 or whatever. I mean, come on. It's like 2008. It's 2019, right? And they're still ranking. I don't understand it. But we're alive, and we do 3 a week. I do 3 podcasts a week. We do Monday, we do movers and shakers, brewers, founders. Then we do Wednesday, we do beer styles. We take the Great American Beer Festival list of styles, and there's about 102 of them, and then they have subcategories, and we pick one a week, and we go through it, what kind of grain, what glass to serve it in, examples of it, qualities of the style, go through all that to just show you that there's, it's an alternative. It's just like pale ales and IPAs and even stouts, but there is a lot out there. And then Friday we do craft brew news, where we look at the news stories of the week, and then we read them, and then we have some comments. Sometimes I have a guest on, and we both talk about it and talk about the state of craft beer, which is, it's like up and down. It's just like drama, but it's all good stuff. It's all good stuff. Okay, that's our show for today, and I will talk to you on Wednesday. Take care.